Okay, welcome everyone. This is Jim Johnson and Dimitrios, co-founders of Strategic Studies. We're going to have a webinar here with the two of us, just to briefly outline the discussion program. We're going to outline the programs available. There are 5 MSc programs, so I'll briefly sketch out the various options there, the various differences between them, the various timings of these programs, and obviously we can go into a bit more detail on the particular course options and schedule as we work through the webinar this morning. Then I'll briefly just introduce the teaching team, of which there are 4 or 5 professors within the politics and international relations, as well as the programs themselves will draw upon staff from different schools. So it's very much a multi-disciplined effort. We have colleagues from the business and law departments also who are actively involved in the teaching of these strategic studies MScs. Then I'll briefly outline some of the distinguishing features, the advantages of studying strategic studies as a discipline, as well as obviously why Aberdeen, in particular, why the Politics and International Relations Department within the University of Aberdeen. Then we can particularly look a bit more detail at some of the program structure itself, some of the options available, and then that will help you to decide between the 5 programs that we currently have on offer. We'll then pause to listen to a few audiograms. This will be just a discussion on one of the courses I teach in the 2nd semester, one of the optional courses called Chinese Security Studies, a very new program that was launched a couple of years ago. And my colleague Dimitrios will also talk about one of the courses he teaches, another optional course within the MSc programs on terrorism and counterterrorism. And then we'll close out with a few comments on the various optional courses, and we'll close with some Q&A discussion and what and things there. So in terms of the available programs on offer, there are 5 which I mentioned. The first is our flagship Security Studies MSc. This will require studying of strategic theory in semester 1, as well as also another core module on religion, conflict and security, and also the initiation or the induction called Getting Started at Aberdeen University. In the 2nd semester of this course, you'll have a choice from a range of courses, including things like energy security, the use of force and international law, which again, as I mentioned, combines the forces of the PIR staff as well as staff from the law school. There'll be a choice there also for things like terrorism and counterterrorism, which you'll hear about later on, as well as Chinese security issues, which I mentioned I teach in the 2nd semester. Then we have a very popular, especially with international students, given the kind of cross-disciplinary and obviously employment opportunities that this particular MSc produces, the Strategic Studies and Management. Now, this is a very kind of innovative and cutting-edge course, which again combines staff and expertise from the business school. In this course, you'll be studying things like leadership challenge, managing change, as well as a range of optional courses in the 2nd semester. Next up, we have Strategic Studies in Energy Security. And now energy security obviously draws on some of the key strengths of Aberdeen being the European Centre for Oil and Gas. And it will obviously draw on some of our expertise on the energy department, climate change, as well as energy politics. Now, in this popular course, there'll be a range of topics, including core courses in the 1st semester, including energy politics, an introduction to energy economics, which again draws on staff expertise from our business school to learn more about the economics related to energy issues. And in the 2nd semester, again, there'll be courses including energy security and the Chinese security issue course will also be another potential option there. And within this course, as I'll mention a bit later in this webinar, the Chinese security issues will also include more broadly defined climate change and the competition for scarce resources, which obviously does include things like water, oil and gas, and more alternative energy sources. Next up is another multidisciplinary MSc. This is Strategic Studies with International Law. This draws from colleagues and expertise from the law school, which is a top 10 ranked school within the United Kingdom. This innovative course, in your first semester, again, you'll have strategic theory and then a range of law-related core options or core courses, including critical legal thinking and scholarship, international law. In the second semester, you'll have a range of courses to choose from, including international humanitarian law, the use of force in international law, which dovetails very nicely from the first semester focus on military force used from a strategic affairs basis, as well as some of the causes of war, which we'll discuss also in the first semester. In addition, you'll be able to choose from other optional courses, including energy security and terrorism and counterterrorism. The final course is a very new, brand new course which kicks off in 2024. And this is a course on strategic studies and diplomacy. And I believe it's one of the few, if not the only course in the United Kingdom which combines strategic studies from both a military, a security perspective, but also from a business perspective, and combines those with diplomacy studies and foreign policy studies. This course introduces a couple of new courses which are specifically assigned to this particular new MSc, including in the first semester, international diplomacy, theory and practice. As well as in the second semester, there will be another course you'll be studying on US foreign policy and diplomacy. So introducing the team within politics and international relations. As I say, apart from myself and my co-director Dimitrios, we also have Sam May, Professor Mervyn Bain, and Malcolm Harvey. Samantha teaches our very popular course on religion, conflict and security in the first semester, which I mentioned is a optional module for some of the MSCs and a core module for the flagship Strategic Studies MSc. And new on board, Professor Bain and Dr. Harvey will be teaching on the new Strategic Studies and Diplomacy course, specifically on US foreign policy, diplomacy, and international diplomacy theory and practice. As I mentioned, in addition, we'll have experts from the business school and the law schools, and they'll be contributing to the teaching and organization of the strategic studies of management, as well as the international law MSc programs, which are outlined. So now we've got a better idea of the structure and the various MSc options that are available. I thought it'd be quite a good at this point, just to have a quick kind of overview or primer on what is strategy and what is strategic studies in a kind of academic sense, and obviously in a more real world application, whether it be on the battlefield or in the ballroom. These particular questions or these issues are very much discussed and taught in the core module on strategic theory in the first semester, which is a core course for all 5 of the MSc programs. There is a introductory lecture, which you can view via the website, and we'll provide links there. And this will give you a kind of taster or a primer on what you can expect from the course in the first semester. So a strategy in its broader sense is the relationship between some kinds of ends or an ultimate goal of a personal entity, whether it be a business, a military organization or an entrepreneur running an independent company, or a technological innovator, which is particularly apropos in the current environment of rapid technological growth. So simply put, it's a strategy is a way we can think about, we can use what we have to get what we want, that is particular objectives. So connecting a means to a broadly defined and a clear objective or an end. So while strategy is often used in a wide kind of variety of settings, strategic studies more particularly is about strategic thought as it relates to a particular kind of means, in this case, military means or armed forces. So for the strategist, questions include things like, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to achieve? What means do I have to achieve them? Whom do I have to persuade to support me? That is, what kind of alliances or particular clients in a business relationship or alliance structures in a security or military perspective do I need to deal with or need to cooperate with? How do I isolate potential opponents, whether they be enemies on a battlefield or adversaries or competitors in a business setting? How do I react when an adversary tries to foil or undermine my plans? And ultimately, how do I bring about peace, cooperation, or perhaps strike a deal or have some kind of a treaty or cooperative or memorandum of understanding in a more business setting? So these kind of interactions and considerations are obviously in the minds of all decision makers across, and they're pretty much common across all times and space and domains, but also with similar patterns of decision making in a peaceful context. So this course is not just about warfaring and war fighting. It also, we talk about peaceful diplomacy and peaceful context where interaction between decision makers and certainly strategy is of particular relevance. The things like here, like public policy making, business strategy, certainly in a business setting where companies of all sizes rely on the cooperation with other companies in competition with third parties or business rivals to capture market share. So while there are obviously fundamental and obvious differences between war-related strategy and strategy in the business or boardroom environment, there are also parallels in the struggle to pursue one's strategic objectives or business mission plans, which the adoption of the military term strategy appears or arises so much in the business world does suggest. So in this first course, the strategic theory and common themes will be played out and discussed throughout the 5 MSCs across all of the optional modules, is examining the contribution of strategy as a broad mechanism for the application of power and force as it applies to national and international security. So questions that will increasingly come up and will challenge your critical analytical skills throughout the course will be things like, what does it mean to think strategically or think outside the box? Why do most strategies invariably fail most of the times, and what is the reason for this? And what is it that a strategist as a professional occupation, unlike things like a philosopher or a diplomat or a computer programmer or an algorithmic developer, does that seems so important and obviously highly valued, given that strategy and strategists in different domains are obviously still highly desired and in strong demand. As I mentioned, on the website, you can watch an introductory video. This is the first lecture, the introduction, what is strategy lecture that I teach in semester 1 as a core module of all the MSc programs. You can listen to that in your own time. And obviously, if you have any questions or you'd like to have more information or supporting material, please reach out to myself, one of my colleagues, and obviously we can help you out there. So moving on to the next section of the webinar. Here we can listen to a couple of very short audiograms which introduce 2 optional modules within the MSc programs, including a course that I teach in the 2nd semester, an optional module called Chinese Security Issues, as well as a course which my colleague Dimitrios teaches also in the 2nd semester on terrorism and counterterrorism. In the current climate of great power adversarial competition, especially Europe versus China and United States versus China in terms of their key pivotal relationship, and with upcoming elections in the United States, as well as various flashpoints and potential issues in the Taiwan Straits and the North Korean Peninsula, which directly relate to China and US relations, and as well as obviously on a terrorism and counterterrorism point of view, the situation in the Middle East. Makes these courses particularly apropos and relevant from not just an academic point of view, but from a contemporary, modern, kind of real-term perspective. And these are all areas and themes that we draw out within these 2 particular optional modules. So let me just kick off without further ado on the first optional module, Chinese Security Issues.
Hi there, this is Jim Johnson. I'm co-director on the Strategic Studies program at the University of Aberdeen. In this short recording, I'd like to talk to you about a very new course entitled Chinese Security Issues. The first of its kind in the UK. This is an optional module available to students on strategic studies, as well as other international relations programs. This course outlines different theoretical approaches to study global security and introduces students to some of the core concepts in security studies. The focus of this module is key approaches, institutions, and contemporary issues in global security, specifically how they relate to the rise of China. Questions we asked during the course is, who rules China and how? What is the nature of China's security policies? And what are the global implications of China's rise? Set in the context of a broader global security issues, the module offers students an introduction to security Chinese policy and approaches to international relations more broadly. In doing so, it lifts the veil of a very misunderstood, controversial, and increasingly critical feature of global security and world affairs. In the course, we explored debates on China's rise, China's growing involvement in international politics and global security. We will also consider the prominent features of the Chinese Communist Party's authoritarian rule and some of the key political, foreign policy, and security issues confronting the regime, and in turn, the global security community. This module will provide you with an understanding of the key sources of conflict and cooperation in China's domestic and foreign affairs. At the same time, it will draw on relevant security studies and international relations theories and concepts, helping us to understand Chinese security policy in greater depth. The course itself is divided into 3 sections covering, first, China's modern political development, its key political, especially foreign policy and security institutions, mechanisms, economy, and military reform. The second part of the course will include Chinese security policy evolution, approaches to international relations, and the nature of China's rise. And the third section will look at specific case studies of international politics and global security pertaining to China. Topics across these 3 themes include things like theoretical approaches to study global security in the relationship to China, China's key security policy-making institutions, China's economic growth miracle, the rise or threat of China debate, Beijing's One Belt, One Road initiative, great power competition, especially between China and the United States, as well as broader issues affecting China's domestic policy and how these in turn affect China's international facing security and foreign policies. Thank you for listening.
Moving on to the second course, this is another optional course I mentioned, taught by my colleague Dimitrios in semester 2, an option on most of the MSc programs I outlined this morning, and this is terrorism and counterterrorism. And I'll let Dimitrios here in his brief audiogram introduce the course in his own words.
Right, hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. This is Dimitrios. I'm one of the co-directors of the Strategic Studies program, and I teach the course on terrorism and counterterrorism, which is one of the most popular courses of the program. So in this course, we are looking at questions related to political violence and terrorism, and this course is divided into 3 main areas. So firstly, we start the course by looking at history and definitions. How do we define terrorism? How do we define political violence? And we're also looking at the historical aspects of political violence and terrorism, because of course this is not a new phenomenon. So the first part of the course, in the first part of the course, we focus on history and on definitions. The second part of the course is focusing on theories. How can we make sense of political violence and terrorism? Why do political groups use violence for political purposes? Is this phenomenon related to poverty? Is it related to education? Is it related to great powers competition? In this second part of the course, we're trying to understand terrorism and terrorist organizations by using some of the key theories in the academic literature. But this course is not only focusing on academic theories and debates, but it has also a strong policy-related aspect. And that's the third part of the course, where we focus on the response of states towards terrorism. And we're also focusing on counter-terrorism. How do states and international organizations respond to terrorism and political violence? One of the key elements in this course is the use of case studies. So in all these 3 parts of the course, we are using both historical and contemporary cases of terrorist campaigns and terrorist organizations. And one of the assignments for this course is a role-playing exercise where students are asked to write a report, a counterterrorism report, and to prepare a counterterrorism strategy for a country. So in terms of employability, this gives to our students some important employability skills, namely writing for policymakers and writing a policy report. Finally, during the last part of the course, we are concluding the course by looking at some future trends and developments, and we have several brainstorming exercises and sessions where together with students we're trying to anticipate the future trends in how states respond to terrorism and how non-state actors evolve their capabilities and make use of new trends in technology. So yeah, that's it in terms of the course. As my colleague Jim said, if you want more information, feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you there. As Dimitrios just mentioned there, in terms of employability, this is again a big focus of the course, and I think the course itself, given its design, its structure, and its contemporary relevance, makes it a very attractive proposal. People that are obviously looking to get into particular sectors and particular industries. We've had alumni and graduates from our programs over the last 40 years, and certainly more recently in my tenure at university, entering various exciting careers, including careers within international organizations such as the World Bank, NATO, United Nations, as well as policy making, government opportunities, both within the UK, the European Union, and overseas, and also policy making and diplomacy have also been a particular interest, and we've had quite a few alumni there who've had some success both in internships as well as more permanent career opportunities within the civil service, policy making, and NGOs and other policy making or policy influencing organizations, both in the UK, Europe, and internationally. In addition, during the course, we also draw on our own networks within the school, our own individual networks, as well as the various networks of other schools that we engage with, especially geography, business, and law, to share and help students to be aware of various internship opportunities that might be relevant as various jobs and events. For example, I've had students being successful on internships at 2 or 3 large think tank organizations, both in the UK and the US. I had a student last year attending a week's workshop in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That was a CSIS think tank sponsored annual conference there, where he gave a presentation on his research. And again, this was something that led to future opportunities within the think tank community. So these are some of the things that we show students and draw on our networks to provide these kind of opportunities. Now, in terms of assignments, which Dimitrios and I briefly mentioned, all of the courses and modules we teach include traditional assignments, things like essays, take-home exams, as well as, and I think quite distinguishing this course from other courses perhaps, is more innovative and assignments and activities that draw on multimedia and certainly group cooperation, things like group seminar and individual seminar presentations, case studies, peer review assignments, and various scenario exercises that we run on a small group exercise within both the tutorial and seminar classes on a campus basis. We also run a writing working shop, which brings some especially international students more up to speed with the kind of Anglo-Saxon style writing requirements that are required at MSc, and also if students are looking forward to pursuing their academic career in PhD studies at Aberdeen or elsewhere in the UK, these writing academic skills will certainly come into play and prove very important. And finally, in addition to these various MSc programs from an academic side, we're also looking to establish a Centre for Strategic Studies in the upcoming semester. And this centre will also include various interdisciplinary research opportunities, including sci-fi or science fiction writing competitions, wargaming initiatives, potential blogging, and opportunities to post publications and policy documents on the website, and obviously engage with the broader research community, enrich the research community at the university and beyond. So there is kind of an important outreach objective of this centre, which goes beyond the university, and again is something we're looking to provide both employability opportunities as well as potential research funding opportunities for students and staff alike. I'll close my comments there, and we'll lead on to the Q&A session. So thank you everyone for your time and interest this morning.
Thank you, Jim and Dimitrios, for that. That was a really great overview into all of the different strategic studies programs that we offer. So what we'll do now is, as Jim has mentioned, we'll go over some frequently asked questions that we get from prospective students, going into a bit more detail on some of the things that you've touched on. And yeah, so without further ado, looking at all of the program's curriculum, there's obviously a dissertation project included in the program. So how do students choose their dissertation subject, or is this chosen for them?
Yeah, I don't mind answering that first question. I coordinate the Strategic Studies dissertation program, which runs in our second half of the year, the second semester, and it's essentially a summer run dissertation program. In terms of the selection of the topics, this is very much down to the student. We do during the writing workshop in the beginning of semester 2, around January, February time, give students some general recommendations and guidance, and the course outline that we provide students at the beginning of the second semester will again give students a kind of the parameters of the kind of topics, including some examples online that students will can choose from. We generally give students the choice of choosing a topic within strategic studies or IR or security studies more broadly. So as long as it comes into those kind of parameters and has a security kind of theme and angle, students there are kind of free to decide their own topic. I generally encourage students to choose if they studied or had a particular interest in topics, or perhaps they write an essay on particular topics in semester 1, to use those as a basis or a foundation to study their dissertation. That is, to do more of an in-depth study on the dissertation program of work they perhaps looked at or had interest in before. And obviously, once the supervisors have been assigned and allocated around the kind of spring break, then we'll obviously have a opportunity for students to meet with their supervisor, and they also have a research proposal assignment in hand as well. And the combination of those two will obviously enable students to refine or help them decide on a particular topic or research question. So these are something that students can, as I say, come up with using their own imagination based on their own interests. And then obviously we'll refine those within the kind of student supervision discussions that obviously that will continue over the summer period.
That's great, thank you. So as you mentioned there as well, the dissertation project taking place over the summer, we do offer January and September starts for these programs. So is that, would you say, the primary difference in the curriculum just being the order in which students would complete modules? Are there any other differences in starting in September versus January?
I mean, of course, there is the issue of the order of modules. So if students start on January, the courses offered in January are different from the courses offered on September. But in terms of the dissertation, as my colleague Jim mentioned, students submit their research proposal quite early, before the start of the dissertation in summer. So that allows them to have more time to refine their project, discuss with potential supervisors, and so on. Right, Jim? Yes.
Yeah, I think as Dimitrios mentioned, it's really the course order, which obviously changes. It's great that we have this January start option, which suits students that can have these two slots to start, so it makes the course a lot more flexible, and I think that's kind of an overall a positive thing, a value add. The only concern that students have is perhaps the dissertation obviously comes before they've studied the core strategic studies theory module in semester 1, so that's kind of a foundational course. We do provide students with some materials and support where required to bring them up to speed, and the other concern perhaps is they haven't got the experience of writing academic writing assignments at this kind of length. But again, we try and kind of assuage some of those concerns with this writing workshop, which is a campus-based workshop we have early on in the second semester. So this will be January time, when the incoming students from a January intake are just about to start. So that will give them a nice foundation and at least help relieve some of those writing concerns which most students had about how to write these dissertation and length assignments. So I think aside from that, it's a positive thing, and it gives students quite a bit of a flexibility. That said, it's usually the case that the majority of students will generally start in September. We usually have maybe 2/3 of our students start then, and perhaps a third of our students starting in January.
That's great. Thank you both. Yeah, as you say, it's really valuable, I think, to have the flexibility in your start dates, particularly if you're, say, graduating the year before and either haven't decided what you're doing, if you're going to go into the workforce or continue education, or for international students, that bit of extra time to get everything in order before coming to Aberdeen to study. So would you say there is a balance of students who are going directly to postgraduate in strategic studies from their undergraduate, or folks returning to school who have maybe been in the field for some time, or is it more one or the other?
Yeah, briefly, that obviously it does change year by year. I think the beauty of this course is one of the reasons that makes it a pleasure to teach is that we have a very broad range. We have from, in terms of ages, mature students coming from various backgrounds. I often, call my classes like, the kind of the UN classroom. We have representatives from, especially more recently, the Global South, from China, from the Americas, from Europe, obviously less since Brexit, but we still have, I think one of the advantages, ironically, of Brexit, that we have more students coming from international, certainly from the Global South, which I think does, provide the course of a lot more equality and diversity and inclusion. These are the kind of strategic objectives that the university is obviously pushing. It obviously helps efforts to kind of decolonize the curriculum, and certainly the presentations that I have and the essay assignments that I have certainly reflect the backgrounds culturally and societally of some of our international student cohorts. In terms of backgrounds, I would say it's generally the case a lot of the kind of UK home students will stay on after undergrad and maybe take a year off for traveling or an internship and then undertake the MSc. So they represent probably the more younger UK students, but the international students are usually have some experience. We have quite a few students that are posted to the United Kingdom from their jobs in overseas. A lot of them are, we've had lawyers, government staff, civil servants. I've had a colonel and a major general. Been one of my students from Nigeria and Ghana that have again been sent over by their military organizations and their various civil servants to attend these courses. I had an excellent student coming from the Norwegian intelligence services again a year or so ago. Again, this is students are perhaps looking to enrich or increase their career perspectives. So they come from an undergrad, maybe already having a master's degree from their own country, studying in the United Kingdom at the University of Aberdeen, with this MSc in hand, that obviously improves their career prospects in their current job, as well as obviously potentially giving them future opportunities in other careers and domains. So that, to answer your question, it's a very broad in terms of ages, international makeup of students, as well as their work experience and their academic experiences, which is incredibly varied. I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that, Dimitrios.
Yes, I agree, and this is my experience as well. It's very interesting to see every year how diverse the student population in our program is, and I think it's very useful for the course discussions as well, because we're talking about issues related to international security, military affairs, international affairs, and so on. And it's very interesting to see how different student experiences and how different backgrounds can bring different answers to the questions we're discussing within the classroom. And this is for the benefit of both the students and the lecturers as well.
Yeah, it sounds like there's quite a bit of diversity in students in the program, both, as you say, in perhaps where they're from, their experience, and especially for a program that does have such a global focus. I think that does absolutely add quite a lot to it. So if someone was interested in taking one of these MSc programs, if they're really interested in strategy, but they don't necessarily have a strategic or security background, do they need a certain qualification before they can apply to the MSc, or would they be able to still join the program?
I think in terms of the actual details, in terms of what qualifies in terms of academic credentials and academic experiences, this is something that obviously students can confirm with admissions. It obviously would vary between various programs and various criteria, depending what country they're coming from, and obviously the various United Kingdom visa rules and regulations, which are obviously changing all the time. So these are something they probably want to ask at admissions to get a very up-to-date and recent and accurate estimate there. Generally speaking, if students had the equivalent of a bachelor's degree from the United Kingdom or equivalent from overseas that is related to social sciences, it doesn't necessarily need to be strategic studies or even international relations. I've got students coming with history undergrad degrees, as well as law degrees. There's quite a few students that invariably have these business degrees, and this is one of the reasons that our strategic studies and management course is extremely popular. So again, it can be very wide ranging. I think something within the liberal arts at a bachelor's level, and I think that was something that would certainly qualify students to be considered for this course. And obviously, in addition to the qualifications per se, we'll obviously look at backgrounds, their proposal, and obviously other features of their resume will be considered for these programs.
That's great, thank you. So that is all the questions that I have. If there's anything that the two of you would like to add, or I'll hand it over to you to close out.
No, just a general comment that we're looking forward to meeting new students every year, because, as I said previously, we are often surprised by the discussions within classrooms. So every year we have new discussions, new perspectives, and we're really looking forward to discussing with students the current events that are happening around the world.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree, and just add that with all the situation versus we're looking perhaps the United States with elections coming up this year. We've got conflicts at present in two regions, both in Europe and the Middle East, which don't seem to be going anywhere quickly. Obviously, adversarial competition. We've got nuclear proliferation as well overseas. I'm attending an event at NATO at the end of this month to discuss ways in which some of these emerging technologies, including things like these large language models and artificial intelligence and cyber attacks and cybersecurity, the potential implications there for security and obviously nuclear deterrence. These are all particularly hot topics which policymakers, government officials, and think tanks obviously do care about and are asking about, and we're being increasingly in demand as speakers for these kind of events, which are again does make these courses that we run particularly relevant, and as we mentioned earlier, increases the employability prospects coming at the back of these courses as graduates. Just again, I'd like to thank everyone for their attention today. Any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with myself and my colleague, and we'll do our best to answer your questions or direct you to particular materials for support. For those of you that decide or are going to be studying with us from September or January, we will be having various induction and sort of social get-to-know-you events, which will be posting on social media as well as emailing students once we start the new semester in September. So I look forward to seeing those of you that are starting in September on campus in the fall.